In this video, we are going to discuss Niccolò Machiavelli, who lived in between 1469 to 1527. Machiavelli, an Italian philosopher, is popularly known as the first modern political thinker, although he is hardly recognized as a profound political theorist. Machiavelli was born in Florence, which was the center of Italian culture and where influence of the European Renaissance was the strongest among all areas. And sometimes Machiavelli is also labeled as the child of Renaissance. In this video, we are going to focus on his ideas on separation of politics from ethics and statecraft. Now, Machiavelli sought to incorporate the cultural values promoted by Renaissance into the realm of political thinking, and he was the first to do this kind of activity. But he also propounded certain standards of statesmanship, variously interpreted, reinterpreted, and sometimes misinterpreted. And that's why he has invited a disrepute for that. And he has been labeled the evil's tutor or despot's tutor. These are different labels, but let's take a look at about his life. Who was Machiavelli? Where was he born? How did he grow? Machiavelli was the son of a civil lawyer, but relatively little is known with surety about his early life. At a young age, he probably became a pupil of a renowned Latin teacher, and there are some indications that he attended the University of Florence. Now, Machiavelli's early years in Florence were marked by Lorenzo de' Medici's ascendancy, who was succeeded by his son Piero de' Medici. In 1494, when Piero de' Medici was expelled, then 4 turbulent years of Republican government emerged. And this was the time when Machiavelli was declared to be ineligible for political office due to his alleged loyalty to the Medici family. However, with the change in the Republican regime again in 1498, he was appointed as the second Chancellor of the Republic of Florence when he entered into public view. Now, Machiavelli is doing his public office work for the next 14 years while functioning as an official envoy on some 35 diplomatic missions, including 4 to France and Siam. So he is gaining diplomatic experience while being on these missions. In 1512, again, consequent upon the restoration of the Medici, Machiavelli is losing his office and undergoing a brief imprisonment. And after that, he is retiring to his farm outside of Florence and embarking on a career of literary writing. Meanwhile, his attempt to gain the favor of the Medici, he wrote his famous monograph called The Prince in 1513, and which was addressed to Lorenzo de' Medici. Simultaneously, he started writing another important work, and that is in short called Discourses on Livy. And the work was the Discourses on the first 10 books of Titus Livius. Shortly, it is called Discourses on Livy. It was completed in 1517. However, both of these works were not published during his lifetime. These were published after his death in 1531. He produced some minor literary work also, but his reputation as a political thinker rests on these two. Now, coming to his reputation, he is widely denounced because he erected a wall of separation between politics and ethics. And let's recall that in the classical Greek tradition of political thought, ethics was viewed as the very foundation of politics. It is ironical that in the age of revival of classical models, that is the Renaissance, Machiavelli made a striking departure from this classical ideal. Machiavelli held that politics is governed by its own independent standards. Hence, it cannot be bound by the conventional ethical standards. So he is insisting on separation of politics from ethics. However, in principle, he agreed that republican government, which was informed by high moral standards, was best for everyone. But in practice, he was not in favor of this kind of governance. Because in principle it's okay, but it would function only when people were inherently virtuous. Since the Italians of his times were basically selfish, greedy, and corrupt, they could be controlled only by a strong and prudent monarch. Again, in principle, he is agreeing that the ruler should be honest, righteous, and true to his word. But when it comes to practicing those words, nobody could have all these qualities. These qualities will not enable a ruler over selfish, greedy, and ungrateful people. So the prince should focus on the preservation of the state without being bound by moral obligations. Now, Machiavelli is suggesting here something, and that is that if a prince resorts to the use of ignoble means for achieving a noble end, he will be exonerated by the people for using these means after seeing the laudable result of his effort. And Machiavelli is claiming that a ruler's success will be judged by popular verdict and that he will be excused for using dubious means if he is successful at the end. For in politics, where there is no court of appeal, one judges by the result. So we see something strange in Machiavelli's thinking. He is bringing out the dark side of rulers. Nobody else could do this. Everybody was trying to be idealist. They were suggesting so far that rulers should do that, but never to be realistic enough to the dark side of human character. He is the first thinker to highlight the dark side of ruler. And he goes on to say this. He says, if political expediency requires the prince to set aside traditional morality, he should go ahead in the interest of successful politics. What he wants is success in politics. And that's why in the contemporary debate on the nature of politics, sometimes it's argued that Machiavelli approved the use of immoral means for achieving political ends. And he held that the use of these means would be treated as honorable after seeing its salutary results. So he was the first to encourage the use of dirty hands in politics. Further alleged that Machiavelli not only allowed the use of dirty hands for political purposes, but he also justified their use as if these hands are actually clean and praiseworthy. because they are able to accomplish great things like saving the community from an imminent disaster. So this kind of interpretation of Machiavelli's work has brought him dishonor, disrepute, that he is an advocate of evil. Now, in this line of argument, Machiavelli sought to reduce politics to a business involving cost behavior or cost-benefit analysis, instead of treating it as an instrument of attaining human values. And that's why he is giving scope to critiques. Critics of this attitude argue that once the use of dubious means for achieving a laudable goal is allowed, these means would soon be used for serving less important purposes, leading a general moral decline, widespread corruption, and consequent disaster. Now we can take a small pause here and can reflect on why Machiavelli is talking like that. Maybe that we are just imagining, maybe that he has unity of the country in his mind, how to keep the country united. But again, critics will argue that in order to keep a country united, or keep your rule intact, you don't have to go for immoral means. Once you practice these kind of things, then it will become normal. Once it becomes normal, then the problem will be multiplied. And that is why Mahatma Gandhi, Indian political activist and social philosopher, insisted that our means should be as pious as the end, because a wrong way will never take us to a right destination. Now, keeping this debate away from our current discussion, let's come to his views on statecraft. Machiavelli is enunciating statecraft, which comprises his most notable as well as most controversial contribution. Notably because it provides unique guidelines on the art of government, it's controversial because it is supposed to promote unscrupulous ways of governance and vindicate certain immoral practices. And that is one of the reasons that critics describe him as devil's disciple, desperate tutor. Machiavelli believes that when people are corrupt, a state should be founded by a single man. And what this single man will do? The single man would not only create a political structure but also shape moral and social character of people. He will function as lawgiver as well as the architect of state and society. Now he will apply his political genius to create a military power strong enough to build a nation state through unification of disorderly ruled cities, and then to infuse new public spirit and civic loyalty into the people. So Machiavelli's prince is the perfect embodiment of shrewdness and self-control, scholars argue. And his prince who makes capital his virtues as well as vices. Now, Machiavelli had a temperamental admiration for the resourceful type of ruler, even if he was unscrupulous. Machiavelli is replicating halfway measures in politics which betray rulers' weakness rather than his conscious behavior or conscientious behavior. He goes to the extent of suggesting that even cruelty should be done with a firm hand, or half-hearted cruelty will bounce back on the ruler. Once and for all, that's his policy, and that's why Machiavelli is looked at negatively. Now he is asserting that man should be either treated generously or crushed because they take revenge for slight injuries, for heavy ones they cannot. He considered that compassion is better than cruelty, but if cruelty is necessary to bring about an orderly government, and if it is proved this way by the results, then it will be considered to be more admirable than compassion. So entirely strange picture of the working of political phenomena, how actual things are happening in politics, and he is targeting this realistic part of politics, and he is the first to do so. Machiavelli goes on to say that a prince should want to have a reputation for compassion rather than for cruelty. However, he should be careful that he does not make bad use of compassion. He should avoid as far as possible. Now, he has so many advices to prince. He has a complete list of advices, and some of these are that he is advising the prince that he should not worry if he incurs reproach for his cruelty, so long as he keeps his people united and loyal. And by ordering executions of only a few individuals, he can save the whole community from a disaster. He is conceding that under normal conditions, a prince would be liking to be loved as well as feared. But in real life, it's very difficult to combine these two conditions. When he is required to choose between the two, it is far better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. So Machiavelli took help of fear factor. And this advice Machiavelli is giving particular to deal with the people who are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers, who shun danger and are greedy for profit. And of course, popularly he is warning that man worry less about doing injury to one who makes himself loved than to one who makes himself feared. Because the bond of love is one which men, wretched creatures that they are, break when it is to their advantage to do so. But fear is strengthened and is always effective. Even if a prince is unable to win the love of his people, he should carefully avoid becoming an object of contempt or hatred. So careful strategy of continuously winning the confidence of people by fear and any other strategy. So he is warning the prince that if the prince is going away from mainstream behavior, he will be hated. And he will be hated if he is not refraining from extremities. He should not touch property or women of his subjects. Another important issue of statecraft, Machiavelli is highlighting that how should prince honor his word. One is making promises, now how to go about these promises. He is telling that under normal conditions, a prince should always honor his word and be straightforward rather than crafty in his dealings. But he is again highlighting his contemporary experience, which showed that princes who had achieved great things were those who had taken their word lightly and who had achieved through trickery and cunning. So Machiavelli is always focusing on dark side of human behavior. He's always warning the prince that don't believe them. Act. So he is identifying two ways of fighting. Man's character here. He's highlighting that man would fight by law and beast would fight by force. So what a prudent prince is supposed to do? He must realize that where the first method proves to be inadequate, he could have recourse to the second. So a prince must understand how to make a nice use of the beast and the man. When it comes to acting like a beast, Machiavelli says the prince should learn from the fox and the lion. The lion is defenseless against traps, and the fox is defenseless against wolves. So the prince should act like a fox in order to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten off wolves. Those who just simply act like lions, Machiavelli calls them stupid. Those who have known best how to imitate the fox have come off best. And he is saying that when a prince acts like a fox, he makes promises to others to save himself from the wrath, but he will not honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage and when the reasons for which he made his promise no longer exist. Why he is telling these kind of advices to prince? Because he believes that if all men were good, it would have been advisable for the prince to keep his word. But because men are not good and who would not keep their word to you, you need not keep your word to them. A prince will never lack good excuses to cover his bad faith. Popularly, he is saying in so many ways, because for Machiavelli, man is by nature weak. And what is his weakness? His natural weakness is that men are so simple, so much creatures of circumstance that the deceiver will always find someone ready to be deceived. And that's why he is advising the prince to pretend to be good in the eyes of others in order to win their praise and loyalty. But he should always be ready to act as a practical man. He should appear to be compassionate, faithful to his word, and indeed he should be so in normal circumstances, but his disposition should be such that if he needs to be the opposite, he knows how to be opposite. So this is very illuminating discussion on Machiavelli's statecraft, and that can be compared to wisdom of Kautilya, who was an ancient Indian exponent of the art of government. Why Machiavelli is not fitting into the political scientist category or thinkers category or philosophers category? In the popular perception, why he is criticized, whether he was right or wrong, what can be his criticism, this is an entirely separate topic.